You're a wizard.
I'm a what?
You're a nigger.
Game over.
Hello there! Since my previous video on this topic got a decent amount of views,
Wow!
I figured I'd go through the trouble of making another one. Since I made my other video on this topic
3,000 years ago.
The Amazon show Rings of Power has proven itself to be utterly ridiculous. So let us dive into this topic again, but from another angle. I recently found and read an article from 2020 titled Tolkien Fans, Black People Exists. Her article immediately begins with stating her skin color. She goes on to state that she has a German father who was an automotive engineer and a black mother who was black.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Then she goes on about her grocery shopping and how she interpreted all sorts of racist remarks in her direction. In short, she feels victimized and oppressed by her white environment.
Help! Help! I'm being repressed, bloody peasant!
I also think she is a victim, but not of white supremacist society, but of our multicultural society. She was brought up with an identity crisis. She didn't know who she was and where she belonged.
I'm a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude. You dudes don't know what dude he is.
What the fuck are you guys talking about?
Within this crisis, her German father had the marvelous idea to introduce her to the Tolkien works. What she ended up with was an even more conflicted personality. She attached her identity as a kid to the world of Tolkien, as many of us did, I imagine. But when she realized one of the main features of her personality, her skin color, wasn't represented in Tolkien's works, she developed hatred for the one thing she held on to.
I hate you.
And now she's writing articles on how Tolkien and Tolkien fans are racist bigots. But what does she actually say about Tolkien? She quotes Tolkien from Chapter 2, The Land of Shadow, from Return of the King, Book 6, as follows.
Presently 2 orcs came into view. One was clad in ragged brown and was armed with a bow of horn. It was of a small breed, black-skinned, with wide and snuffling nostrils, evidently a tracker of some kind.
Now what does she have to say about this passage? Let's read. This passage not only codes orcs as black, it uses specific descriptors, wide and snuffling nostrils, the use of the pronoun it, as well as the animalistic vocabulary breed and tracker echoes white supremacist ideologies of purity that differentiate black people as separate subhuman species.
What the fuck are you guys talking about?
At this point, she's so confused she appears to be identifying herself with the only black skin color she could find in the books, orcs. Viewing her skin color as the most relevant part of her personality, and then proceeding to identify herself with bloody orcs. I mean, in the world of Tolkien there is no lower than orcs. So how low can you go? Well, she's basically at the bottom right now.
I think I found the bottom.
But putting the journalist's psychoanalysis aside, was Tolkien actually a racist?
That's gotta be racist. There's no way that is like of our culture.
You may be surprised by my answer, but I'd say yes, he was. This seems to be new information to many people, but what was racism originally? Racism originated in the 19th century as a sort of branch of biology. People in the 19th century were convinced that there were racial differences, and dedicated entire studies to find out these differences.
Little orcs round.
We're not orcs. We're hobbits.
Maybe you are, and maybe you aren't.
A good example of these racist studies is craniometry. This study was dedicated to the measurement of skulls. The science on measuring and calculating skulls was invented by a Swedish guy, or scientist back in the day, called Anders Retzius. On the basis of measurements he took of the skulls from different peoples, he concluded that there were indeed different races, and that these races must be different from each other in their cognitive abilities, as well as other biological functions. Now, it is important to remember that these people were not racists in the way we today use the term.
I have no memory of this place.
They were simply children of their time, trying to figure out in a, to them, scientific way what they saw with their own eyes, namely, clear differences in appearance within the human species. It was only in later years that biologists figured out that these studies were invalid and wrong.
It's all wrong.
However, the damage was done. These studies influenced ideas and ideologies that went into overload in the all too familiar 20th century regimes. Now, when you combine these racial studies with Darwin's theory of evolution, and more specifically the survival of the fittest, people from the 19th and 20th century made the logical assumption, from their perspective, that Western Europeans must be the superior race, since by the end of the 19th century, the Europeans had basically the entire world under their control. This was the origin of racism. It weakened after World War I and finally died off after the Second World War. Now when we go back to Tolkien, Tolkien lived in this time. Like I said, this racism weakened after World War I, but it was not gone, and it continued to fester in society and influenced the minds of the ordinary European peoples. While Tolkien on an individual level may have been a reasonable person that wasn't actually racist, society around him was racist and influenced him accordingly. Tolkien was, much like Anders Retzius, also a child of his time, as are we all. But should we therefore toss aside his works, mutilate them, twist them into modern beliefs?
No!
I view Tolkien's works both as literary art as well as historic works. There are lots of great works in history that didn't have the same ideology as our modern society, but we don't destroy or change them because of this. We accept the differences and learn from them, and we peacefully move on to make literary works of art of our own. Tolkien made literary art with a wealth of wisdom in it. However, mixed in with this wisdom are beliefs that are not compatible with our modern society. We should accept this fact and not try to bend it to our will. So if our black lady journalist has a problem with liking Lord of the Rings for the lack of black skin coloring, she can always enrich herself with all sorts of cultural history and make fictional works of her own. I, for one, would definitely be interested in reading her works, even if my skin color is not represented in her stories.
I bid you all a very fond farewell. Goodbye.